Okay, just listen to me.
You're going to ring the doorbell. Somebody's going to answer the door. Before they can get out a single word, you take that rag that's soaked in that shit and you cover their nose and their mouth.
Hey, Mike.
There are crime movies where loyalty is tested. There are time travel movies where reality bends. And then there are movies that decide to throw gangsters into a night that literally refuses to stay linear. When I hit play on Hulu's first trailer for Mike and Nick and Alice, I didn't just see a sci-fi gimmick layered onto a mob story. I saw something more ambitious. I saw a film trying to weaponize chaos. And if it pulls this off, we're not just getting a quirky streaming release. We might be getting one of the most unpredictable genre mashups of 2026. Let's slow this down and really unpack it. Hulu is positioning Mike and Nick and Alice as an adult R-rated, stylized action comedy set deep inside the criminal underworld. That alone would be enough to grab attention, but then the trailer casually drops its wild card. There's a time machine involved. Now think about that for a second. Organized crime is already a world built on shifting alliances, paranoia, and betrayal. Add time travel into that ecosystem, and suddenly trust becomes mathematically impossible. Because if time can reset, loop, fracture, or duplicate, how do you even measure loyalty? The story centers on two longtime friends, Mike and Nick, played by James Marsden and Vince Vaughn. They're navigating the dangerous terrain of organized crime, and as the trailer suggests, they're in the middle of what might be the most catastrophic night of their lives. The complication? They're both in love with the same woman, Alice, played by Eiza González. So now we're dealing with crime, friendship, romance, jealousy, and temporal instability. That's not just a genre blend, that's controlled chaos. And the trailer leans into that tone. It feels fast. It feels stylish. It feels self-aware without being smug. There's bone-crunching action, rapid-fire dialogue, and a sense that every decision could implode the entire timeline. But here's where things get even more interesting. There isn't just one Vince Vaughn. There are two. That detail isn't just a comedic punchline. It's a structural promise. Two versions of the same gangster inside a time-fractured narrative. That opens the door to layered betrayals, mirrored conversations, and the kind of escalating absurdity that could spiral beautifully if written with precision. Now let's talk about the filmmaker behind this. Mike and Nick and Alice is written and directed by BenDavid Grabinski. If the name rings a bell, it should. He previously directed Happily, a dark comedy thriller, but more importantly, he created Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. That animated series earned extraordinary critical praise, landing near universal acclaim before Netflix controversially canceled it after one season. That matters because Scott Pilgrim Takes Off balanced heart, meta humor, stylized action, and emotional sincerity in a way very few projects manage. If Grabinski brings even half of that tonal discipline into this live-action space, Mike and Nick and Alice could become more than a quirky streaming title. It could become a cult hit. The film premieres at the 2026 South by Southwest Film and TV Festival on March 14th before landing on Hulu March 27th. That SXSW launch is strategic. SXSW has become a playground for genre hybrids. It's where unconventional films find momentum before hitting broader audiences. This isn't being quietly dropped onto a streaming homepage. It's being introduced as an event, and that signals confidence. Now let's look at the cast dynamic because this trio is not random. Vince Vaughn's comedic credentials are obvious. Wedding Crashers, Dodgeball, Anchorman. He built an entire persona around rapid sarcasm and chaotic confidence. But in the last decade, he's shown he can deliver brutal physicality in films like Brawl in Cell Block 99 and Dragged Across Concrete. He can be funny. He can be terrifying. And in a film like this, he may need to be both simultaneously. James Marsden is equally versatile. Mainstream audiences know him from Sonic the Hedgehog and Enchanted. He can lean into charming absurdity, but he also has legitimate action pedigree from the X-Men franchise, and he's set to reprise Cyclops in Avengers Doomsday. That blend of charisma and combat credibility makes him a strong counterbalance to Vaughn's intensity. And then there's Eiza González. She's not just the romantic center of this triangle. She brings action credibility from Baby Driver, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and Fountain of Youth. She can handle chaos. She can handle physical stakes. And if the script gives Alice real agency instead of reducing her to a love interest caught between two men, this trio could have serious chemistry. The supporting cast only amplifies that potential. Keith David, Jimmy Tatro, Emily Hampshire, Arturo Castro, Louis Tan, Ben Schwartz, and Stephen Root round out the ensemble. That's a lineup capable of delivering tonal shifts on command. Stephen Root alone can tilt a scene into brilliance with a single deadpan line. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Time travel is a dangerous storytelling device. Used well, it deepens tension and forces characters to confront the consequences of their choices repeatedly. Used poorly, it dissolves stakes. If characters can reset the night endlessly, danger loses weight. So the big question is this: does the time machine amplify the emotional and narrative stakes, or does it become a gimmick? From the trailer, it appears that the time device escalates chaos rather than neutralizing it. Each loop seems to create more complications, more fractures, more versions of betrayal. That's promising. Because in a crime story, consequences are everything. And if time travel becomes a metaphor for regret, for trying to undo mistakes in love and loyalty, then this film could explore something deeper beneath its absurd surface. Let's zoom out even further. Streaming platforms are increasingly becoming the home for mid-budget genre experiments. Theatrical studios are cautious with high-concept hybrids that don't guarantee blockbuster returns. But Hulu can afford to take a swing at a stylized R-rated time travel gangster comedy. And that's important, because innovation often happens in the spaces where risk tolerance is higher. The marketing describes the film as highly comedic, stylized, betrayal-filled, and fight-heavy. That's a lot to juggle, but if the tone remains consistent and the script respects its own internal logic, this could land as one of those streaming originals people discover and rewatch. Here's something I want you to think about. In an era where audiences are flooded with content, what makes you click on a movie like this? The concept, the cast, the festival buzz, or the sheer unpredictability? Because unpredictability might be this film's greatest asset. The idea of two gangsters and the woman they both love trying to survive the most dangerous night of their lives is already strong. Add a time machine, and that night becomes elastic. It can stretch, rewind, multiply, and if that elasticity is tied to emotional stakes rather than random spectacle, then Mike and Nick and Alice could balance absurdity with heart. Grabinski has already proven he understands how to blend kinetic action with character sincerity. If he translates that sensibility into live action, the result could feel fresh in a landscape crowded with formula. But this project lives or dies on execution. Too much chaos, and the narrative fractures. Too much logic, and the absurdity feels restrained. The sweet spot is controlled madness. So I'll ask you directly, does this feel like the kind of genre experiment that could surprise people? Or does time travel in a gangster comedy feel like a narrative risk too far? I'm genuinely curious where you stand, because projects like this either become cult favorites or footnotes. The premiere at SXSW suggests confidence. The March 27th Hulu release positions it as a spring streaming event rather than a buried catalog drop. And if the buzz from the festival screening is strong, this could build serious momentum quickly. Mike and Nick and Alice isn't trying to be subtle. It's trying to be bold. Gangsters, betrayal, romance, time fractures. Two Vince Vaughns. That's not safe filmmaking. And honestly, that's exactly why I'm paying attention. If you're drawn to genre blends that don't fit neatly into a box, this one should be on your radar. I'll be watching to see whether the time machine becomes a storytelling weapon or just a shiny distraction. Because the difference between those two outcomes determines whether this becomes a streaming curiosity or something far more memorable. This is Screen Radar, and I'll see you in the next breakdown.